Hello everybody, and welcome to Health Tips for Life. Which, by the way, I decided to change the name of the channel, which I will share with you. So, very excited to be with you on this episode of Conversation with Dr. Stewart. So, but before I'll bring in Dr. Stewart, I need to share a few things with you. As I mentioned, I will be changing the name of the channel to Health and Wellness Wisdom. The reason I'm doing this is because I got some feedback that a lot of people trying to find the channels, but they couldn't. So when they type in health tips for life, it takes them some other. So my thinking was maybe it was too complicated. So I decided just to change this. So you're not going to see the change right away. It's going to take about 10 days. This is how YouTube works. But I just wanted to let you know. So the new name of the channel is Health and Wellness Wisdom. So the other announcement I want to make is I mentioned to you I'll be doing these episodes with Dr. Stewart every Tuesday. It's not going to be on Tuesday, it's going to be on Mondays. And the reason being because on Tuesdays, I have commitments for the government course that I teach online. So every Tuesday for the next 2 months. I don't know if you're aware of the, I do teach a government course, but that will be on Tuesday. So those are the two announcements I wanted to share with you. So, well, today I got a very, very interesting topic that's based on your feedback first, but also the importance of it. And this has to do with stress and anxiety. So we are trying to understand at least the underlying psychological aspects of it. And with this, I am going to bring Dr. Stewart in the studio. Hello, Doc.
Hello, Dr. O. It's a
How
pleasure
are
to be
you?
with you again.
Yeah, so excited to have you here. I'm sure
Well, I'll
our
tell you, I'm not
viewers,
suffering from anxiety,
yeah, well,
but 42.5 million Americans today are suffering from clinically diagnosed anxiety. This is not a trivial event. This
mm,
is the most common mental health concern in the country today.
wow.
Yeah, that means when you walk into a room of 100 people,
Mm-hmm.
more than 19 of them are having severe anxiety problems right in your presence. They might be hiding it, but
Yeah,
it is a real epidemic. It's
wow.
about as bad as it gets.
Yeah. Well, first, let's, how about if we at least define what anxiety is? To some people, they don't understand. Is anxiety stress, or is stress anxiety, or what is it?
It is both physiological and psychological. Let's do some symptoms and see where we are. People feel nervous. They're
Mhm.
restless. They're tense. They have a sense of impending danger or uh, something bad is going to happen to them. Their hearts race. Think that's dangerous? Oh, their blood pressure goes up. Just as dangerous. They frequently have breathing issues where they breathe too rapidly. Um, they sweat a lot. And you ever shake hands with somebody who's got sweaty hands? Most of
Mhm.
us have. With this tool, you say, this person has severe anxiety. Their hands are sweating. And they have trouble concentrating. It also makes them worry about things and distracts them away from being really productive
Mm.
or really being available to their families. So you get this is really quite a severe issue, especially since so many people have it. We
Yeah.
also know that at some point in everyone's life, or in most people's lives, that's over half, they're going to have some anxiety issues. Now, the official statistic is about 34%, but there are some experts in the field who say half of Americans at some point in their life have anxiety that's so severe that they could be clinically diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. Going,
Wow.
this is really a problem. And then you go into what actually is this? Well, it's a
Mm.
result. It's an accumulation of stress, and people don't. Here's something that I think surprises most people. What are and let's give you the test here, David. What are the forms of stress? Start with thermal.
Hmm.
Too much heat, too much cold. That stresses your whole system, starting with your adrenal glands. What about physical stress when you overwork, overexercise? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What about chemical stress? Yeah, well, you get around some poisons or pollution, and it terribly stresses your adrenal glands and your whole system. And then there's the psychological, mental stress of all the bad news, of people being mean to you, of the bomb is coming, the next economy fall is at hand. I mean, there's a whole lot to talk about that, and I think we'll get into that. But
Yeah.
I mean, all these things. Here's a funny one. What's the number one stress that most people experience most days of the week? Driving their car.
Wow.
Some neuroscientists decided, well, let's find out what happens when people drive their cars. So they wired them up with their brain activity, their skin, and so on. And they
Hmm.
find out as soon as the car starts to move, their anxiety level shoots up. And when they get out of the car, within a minute, their stress level goes back down to a normal range.
Wow.
People are scared
Very
to
interesting.
drive their cars.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there is one thing that I mean, for little knowledge that I have on this one here. Something has to do, based on my reading, has to do with adrenal glands.
Yes.
What is that? Where is in the body, and how does it work?
The adrenal glands are the main organ, but many
Okay.
other organs are involved. The main organs that are involved with stress.
Okay.
They sit right on top of your kidneys. Your kidneys are in your mid to lower back. And they
Mm-hmm.
sit one on each kidney, and about
Mm-hmm.
the size of a walnut. But boy, these little glands are truly powerful. They do a number of cool things,
Mm-hmm.
including sex hormones, including temperature, including, and one of them is dealing with stress by releasing a particular chemical called cortisol.
Hmm.
Cortisol is one of the things it does is it pumps blood sugar into the cells of your body. And if you don't have any cortisol, that means the next step is the graveyard. So
Wow.
cortisol is a good thing, but under
Mm-hmm.
stress, oh, here's a way to imagine it. Because there's this very popular thing about being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, our ancestors and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, our number one enemy was each other, but let's say it's a tiger. And you need an extra burst of energy to climb up a tree or to run away or to fight. The adrenal glands kick in and give you a tremendous boost from either glucose, fat, or protein to pump energy into your cells to allow
Mm-hmm.
you to escape or to fight. It's a fight or flight thing. Real interesting study was done on the plains animals of Africa. That is like zebras. Matter of fact, it was done on zebras. They were able to measure cortisol levels when they're grazing, and the animals were completely calm, peaceful, and then a predator appeared on the scene, and the cortisol levels spiked
Wow.
ultra high. And there was one other time that they spiked. That was during mating season,
Hmm.
when the males had to fight each other. So we have two places where cortisol is absolutely essential in terms of either fighting and prevailing or getting away.
Hmm.
And the amazing thing was, after the predator left, within 2 or 3 minutes, cortisol levels went back down to normal. That fast.
Interesting.
This stuff is
Interesting.
interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Is that what they refer to in the? I think the health literature as the four S's. Is that what it is? Like for the when the system has to deal with four functions when it comes down
Yeah.
to the adrenal. They call them four S's. That's what I read.
The four S's have to do with adrenal function, and here's what they do. The first is sugar regulation. Sugar
Interesting.
metabolism. That doesn't mean table sugar. It
Mm,
means things that your body can convert to uh, quick energy at the cellular level. So it
mhm,
can be glucose. It can be like carbohydrates. It can be fats, which is actually the best form of energy for your body, but it takes a conversion to get to that. But fat is far and away a better source than uh, than anything that has short chain carbohydrates in it. And proteins can be converted also to blood sugar. The
mm,
adrenal glands manage that. They, you also, your blood has the same salt content, the same percentage of salt that the ocean has.
interesting.
Wonder where we evolved from.
Wow.
Some people might say, well, it's maybe the ocean. But the adrenal glands, in coordination with the kidneys,
Mhm.
regulate the level of salt to match it almost perfectly with seawater.
Wow.
Then the next thing it does is it manages sex hormones, androgens for men, estrogens for women. And without the adrenal glands, well, without the adrenal glands, you just die. So,
Wow.
and then it's a source of rapid energy in the form of cortisol, which we were talking about just a minute ago.
Yeah.
How to
Mm,
get quick energy into your system. Your body pumps an excessive amount of cortisol. Wow.
yeah.
The issue starts coming when people have severe anxiety is the adrenal glands have to work overtime.
Mm,
And overtime means that these organs can be exhausted. And there's several phases of that, but adrenal fatigue is a real thing. And that is where the adrenal glands have been so stressed for so long that they no longer can perform those four functions adequately. And you see people who are just in exhaustion all the time. And you ask them, well, how much stress have you had? Well, a lot for a long time. And the adrenal glands just can't do it anymore. Now, there are things to do about it, but it takes a while to remedy that situation.
yeah.
My estimation is at least 50% of Americans, and this is my clinical experience, not statistics. 50% of the people that I've dealt with in the past have had some severe measurable form of adrenal fatigue. You talk about operating suboptimally.
Yeah.
They just can't get there. They just don't have the organ strength in the adrenal glands
Mhm.
to allow them to be highly productive, highly effective human beings. They're just worn out.
So is this like the side effect of anxiety?
They're more or less like this, but yes,
Ah,
it
okay.
is this. It is a direct result of
Hmm.
anxiety. And you might take a look at what are the causes of anxiety.
Yeah.
Well, ready for this, David? Number one is lack of sleep.
Oh
Hey,
my God.
did we talk about sleep
I
before?
remember. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a thing about 9 to 9.5 hours of sleep,
Hmm.
it is probably the number one remedy for anxiety. But it has to be constant, has to be the way you live your life all the time. But it is the number one issue. There are lots of other issues too, like what does the news focus on? Well, the
Mm,
news focuses on gaining an audience. And we know that that one of the major functions of the brain is to pay attention to things that are dangerous or harmful or hurtful. You could say, well, that sounds pretty important if we're going to survive. Well, yes, it is. And so uh, I was dealing with one real expert in this area, and he said the brain is 7 times more attentive to dangerous, harmful situations than to pleasant, happy ones or calming ones. Then, under his breath, he said, it's more than that. It's more than 7 times.
mm,
But he said, I can only verify 7. But what it tells you is we as human beings pay attention to things that are potentially dangerous. So if you turn on the news, what do you hear?
Yeah.
Things that are dangerous, things that are really, really upset us. Uh, when you hear drug companies talk about their stuff, or inoculations, it's always about, if you don't, you don't want to die of this as in a wheezing, coughing mess.
Yeah.
So get this inoculation. You're going, okay. So it really compels people. And when people talk to each other, a whole lot of people talk about what's wrong and what they don't like.
Hmm.
All of that stimulates the adrenal glands. And one of the functions of this is, or one of the outcomes is, that people get addicted to their own adrenaline. They get addicted to the cortisol rush that they get, which just tires them out even more.
Hmm. Very, very interesting. So there's, yeah, go ahead, Ross.
Well, it's going to go into, then you take a look at any number of other situations
Mm-hmm.
that we're getting negative information. And then you go to the chemical issues in our food, in our water, in our air. They're causing us enormous stress too. These things add up pretty darn fast.
Wow. Hmm.
And then you drive your car. Okay,
Of
so now
course.
we really got to go in full circle here.
Yeah. You add that one to it. So
Yeah,
no, it becomes the question that for some people that and this is a just question that comes to the top of my head.
yeah.
The difference between men and women when it comes down to anxiety. Is there a sort of, does man deals with anxiety different than women because of the physiological structure,
Yes.
or is it the same?
No, it's not the same at all. One of the things is that women are twice as likely to have a severe anxiety disorder than men.
Hmm.
It's just the way it occurs. I don't have a real good explanation for that, but the national statistics are quite clear. And we also know that people who are more introverted have significantly more symptoms, and they get significantly more anxiety disorders. So people who are more or less quiet and isolated,
Mhm.
they suffer a lot more. And men tend to be either exhausted or angry. Women tend to be more shrill and more easily upset and display it as anger or criticism. But underneath it is an attempt to control the situation.
Mhm.
Of course, it's futile because they can't, and it's not the solution to an anxiety disorder, although it is a real common response. Let me control the situation and it'll get better. You can't control it, and even if you could, it wouldn't be better.
Doesn't
So you
work.
get these two very different kind of responses.
Yeah. Yeah. What about the difference between adults and young, young adolescent and so forth, or even younger than that, preteens, for example? Does it make a difference?
7% of young children, that is 3 to 17, have
Hmm.
been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder.
Hmm.
And you're going, what's this about? I saw a study that really, really shook me. It was the average first grader in 2023 experiences the same level of stress that the average 22-year-old experienced in 1900. Going, what?
Wow.
The
Hmm.
pressures on kids, the violent video games, the shocking things that kids are exposed to, and all the pressures put on them,
Yeah.
and bad food, and so on. You sort of really get the idea of these kids are really put upon with stress.
Hmm.
And very often it's either the kids get really quiet, they start acting like they're ADHD, and they're either disruptive in the classroom or they're non-participating. And there are frequently behavior problems at home too.
Mm.
I spent years working in public schools from a standpoint of isolating the worst kids and figuring out solutions for them, either at the state level or a local mental health center where I worked. So I got to see the worst of the worst, and boy, there were some really bad kids. I mean, their behavior was really out of bounds,
Yeah.
and it was all the bad things you can think of: bad food or very little food. The joke we had is how many elementary kids have been sent to school with a breakfast of a Pop Tart.
Cereal. Oh, well, Pop Tart. Yeah.
Cereal was low on the list, believe it or not.
Oh.
Apple strudel Pop Tart was the number one thing. Going, there's no nutrition there at all. The shocking part was how many fifth and sixth graders were sent to school with a cup of coffee.
Hmm.
Going, unless you've lived it, you can hardly believe these things are going on, but they are.
Wow.
Yeah, I
That's,
know.
yeah, it's shocking. I mean, I'm sure for us, I didn't come across anything at least to understand or to compare the US to other Western countries as far as the anxiety, whether because the lifestyle we live here in the US versus, let's say, someone in Germany or France or the UK. I don't know. I don't know. Is there a big difference there or about the
I
same?
don't know. When I lived in Germany, I didn't deal much with kids,
Yeah,
so I don't really know.
yeah.
Uh, the German people I dealt with and knew really well, they didn't seem to have much of an anxiety disorder.
Hmm.
And German food was really quite different from American food. And one of the things they had was a lot of fermented cabbage called sauerkraut, which is a major digestive help.
Yeah.
And of course, they ate a lot of sausage, but they also had a lot of sauerkraut, and they didn't fill up on Pop Tarts. They considered that not food.
No, for sure. For
The matter of
sure.
fact, I couldn't even see that you could buy them. But I
Yeah.
haven't lived in any other country for an extended period of time,
Yeah.
so I don't know. But I certainly got to see it for decades here in the United States,
Yeah.
and we'd get at the clinic where I worked. Of course, I was in charge of the programs. The first thing we would do with a kid who has a behavior problem and had high anxiety, we start giving him breakfast. 3 days, and very frequently the anxiety went away.
Hmm.
3 days?
Wow.
Now, you can't do that with an adult because adults are now in adrenal fatigue, and they really need a lot of help in terms of getting someplace.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some pretty good ways to cope with this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about PTSD for just a minute,
Sure.
because that's the end game here of adrenal fatigue and other problems. So we did a real deep dive into this to see if we could figure out what to do about it. As you probably know, every day a veteran or an active service person commits suicide. And I was a member of an organization for a while, and I know you know about it.
Yeah.
And we're really looking at what's going on here. And at the heart of this was two major issues. The brain is organized to solve terrible anxiety issues, like frightening things. And if it can't find a solution, it just keeps obsessing on it. And the more obsessing on it, the more adrenal fatigue would set in.
Mm.
Also, digestion was profoundly hurt, which means even if they ate, they missed out on a lot of the nutrients because they couldn't dissolve them and absorb them. They couldn't break it down into into particles that would go into their blood system and feed their cells. And the major issues were, the major treatments were relive the trauma over and over again. And that was the exact wrong thing to do. So going after the adrenal fatigue was an excellent way to start digging into that system, then replenishing the levels of neurotransmitters through diet and through supplements. The results were stunning.
Interesting. That leads me to the next question pertaining to, is that how we deal with it? It's like, is this a lifestyle? Is it a technique for it? And also with this question, I wanted to tackle the aspects of, there are two different school of thoughts regarding the approach to it. There is the holistic approach, okay? And there is the traditional medical with medications and so forth.
Right.
So
I've had like over 30 years of dealing with both systems. And there are two major medications that psychiatrists and medical doctors prescribe, and they're SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and selective norepinephrine uptake inhibitors. Those are temporary fixes, but long term they simply don't work. I'm referring now to medical statistics and also my personal observation, but the medical statistics couldn't be more clear. They're not a solution. But these are the two that have the most use in the United States. A more holistic approach is you need to change a whole lot of things in your life. Starting with, you need to sleep. And of course, that's going to start revolving around some of the issues we talked about last week. Should you avoid caffeine after noon? Oh, you certainly should. Should you avoid alcohol? Should you avoid recreational drugs? Yeah, because they disrupt your sleep cycles. Also, you have to. This regulating blood sugar levels is a remarkably important thing in terms of reducing your anxiety. If you're going to deregulate your blood sugar with bread and bagels and donuts and whatever else is a short chain carbohydrate, your cortisol levels are going to spike up and down and up and down and up and down. And that profoundly hurts your sleep. Oh, and by the way, it's another way to get adrenal fatigue, because those things call on cortisol to regulate blood sugar levels. So I can't emphasize enough about the thing with sleep and the thing about regulating your diet. Vegetables, berries, and fish and protein and fats are the way to go. And I think we talked about this last week. I can't emphasize how important those things are.
In addition to the lifestyle, whatever lifestyle might includes in this case, to sort of, and this is almost based on a question by a viewer here. Let me share it here so we can see all of us, because we are here to learn. So Eternal wrote, are there any techniques or lifestyle changes to help reduce anxiety?
Oh, let me give you a dozen of them. The first thing is to have conversations with people who will just listen to you without criticizing you or without giving you advice. Now, that's hard to find because everyone wants to solve your problem for you, but that isn't the solution. The solution is to have someone friendly around you. That calms people enormously when someone will listen to what you've got to say. The next thing is keeping physically active. One of my colleagues at one of the places I worked was running a, a, a teenage program for kids that were disruptive, had high anxiety and high depression. So what they did is they got them running track. And so they were actually running a couple miles a day.
Hmm.
Their anxiety reduced dramatically. They stopped being problematic in school, and their depression lifted. And I got to see it.
Wow.
I mean, we read the research that said it would do that, but research is what research is.
Yeah.
But seeing it, reading the research and seeing the program in action, it worked.
Mhm.
And when you exercise respectful of your body, it releases certain kinds of hormones that are very relaxing. It also helps you sweat out some toxins that you probably built up. The benefit in terms of anxiety and depression is excellent. Another thing that it's less and less of a problem for people now because smoking seems to be on the decline. But nicotine is highly aggravating. It worsens anxiety. So any kind of smoking,
Mm. Interesting.
Another thing is, if you know that 42.5 million other Americans are suffering with this, you know you're not alone in it. And there's something comforting knowing this is a real problem. This is the number one problem that people have. So if you've got it, you're not alone in it.
Mhm.
And there's some real comfort with that. Another thing that if people will do it and they start keeping a journal of what upsets them
Yeah.
and what they're going to do about it, they stop being helpless. Give you an interesting British study. I think it was Oxford University School of Medicine did this, but I can't remember the exact quote anymore.
Mhm.
I can't remember who did it. They decided to measure anxiety and depression among corporate workers. And their hypothesis was that the higher up in terms of authority that you have, the more anxiety you would experience. They found just the opposite.
Mm.
The more power and authority you had to make things happen, the more control you had, the less anxiety, the calmer you were. And an interesting thing that they found was that they slept better and the digestive systems were healthier. Going, you mean the more
Wow.
you're in control of your life and get to influence things? I go, well, now that you listen to it, it makes perfect sense. The more in control you are, the less anxiety you experience and the calmer you are. So there's a thing of what can you control in your life, and coupled with what are the triggers that set you off. And once you know what those are, is there anything you can do about it? So that really turns out to be a gigantic help.
Yeah.
And if you're keeping a journal, one of the things to put in there is, what do you want to experience in your life? Actually giving you guidance as to how to really get calm, how to get really happy by accomplishing the things you want to accomplish and experiencing what you want to experience.
Mhm.
That's rare that people do that, except on the most superficial level.
Yeah.
But you talk about taming anxiety, living life on your terms is really pretty darn good answer.
Mhm. Very interesting. There is just to share this with our viewers here from John Angelia Jones. She wrote, "Add obesity among our children. Why? Many hours playing video games and not playing outside." Spot on.
Oh, is she right? Is she right or
Spot
what?
on. Spot on.
Let's
Yeah,
talk about
kids.
video games just a minute.
Yeah.
Because, one of the things I did from 2000 to 2022 was I did a lot of brain chemistry work. And one of the things that we found was that the most popular video games were the ones that maneuvered a particular neurotransmitter called dopamine.
Mm.
If they could get your dopamine level up, which is pleasure, 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 not happiness, but pleasure, they'd get you addicted to it, so you'd sit and play it for hours. You'd do it rather than sleep. You'd skip meals just so you could keep this dopamine rush going. So video games are not our children's friends.
Well, that explains why I mean, uh, the children here in the US is kind of obese. I mean, it's makes perfect sense. Too much time in front of a screen and lack of activities outside. And I think the whole lifestyle of a society as to where we are going. I mean, I go for walks. I walk on a daily basis, and in addition to the gym and so forth. And I don't see young people walking out. Literally, I hardly ever. I see older generation, older couple walking.
Yeah,
I don't see young people. I remember my days when I was in my late teens, early 20s, whatever. I was always running outside and all that. But I don't see that these days or the last few years.
I saw a cartoon I think really speaks to it.
Yeah.
The cartoon was 1960,
Hmm.
and mom was saying, I can't get him in the house. He's out playing all the time. 2023. I can't get him away from the computer screen. He won't go outside. You're
Wow.
going, yeah. Then what percentage of young people, what percentage of Americans can't qualify to go into the military? Do you know that number? It's like
Yes.
77%. It's
Yeah,
real high.
it's very high. Very
And,
shocking.
and what percentage of young people are overweight? Yeah, it's got to be in the 50th percentile now, on its
Yeah.
way up.
Yeah.
You see these really pudgy, out of shape kids. What a shame.
It's the lifestyle we have.
I
No, I
think,
have.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I think I read this in China, they decided to limit the amount of time that people were allowed to be online with video games. I think it was 2 hours a day or 1 hour a day.
About right.
Because do you remember something like that as well?
I did read something like that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course,
And
they had.
it was the conversation here that it was misinterpreted as what the government dictates to your right and freedom, which has nothing to do with that. It has to do with your welfare for the next generation. I mean, do you see our government doing that by saying, "Hey guys, you need to," or people, you need to sort of take your kids out for walks and all that stuff, encouraging that? No, they won't.
They've got other agendas. That's
I'm sure.
this isn't the place to talk about
I'm
those.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. What I was going to ask Ross is there a possibility, and again, this is just me thinking outside the box, is there a possibility for anxiety to go from one generation to the next?
Yes,
Wow.
and without going into the real complexity of that,
Hmm.
if a mother has anxiety, there are two things going on. Her organ systems have something called set points.
Hmm.
So if she has made this dynamic organ adjustment to living with stress. The infant that she's carrying in utero carries the same set points as mom.
Wow.
So if mom is highly anxious, the baby comes out highly anxious. It's really scary. If mom is schizophrenic, the baby comes out with schizophrenic tendencies. If mom is depressed, I mean, you start getting these things, you're going,
Mhm.
holy, this set point stuff is for real. We also have to consider that if mom was in one of these stressed states, she probably wasn't eating very well. She wasn't sleeping well. So this is the heritage as one part of it. The second thing is something called the microbiome. This is what the 12 to 1700 critters that live in your small intestines. This is what really digests your food. They eat it, and their waste products are nutrients. So they actually
Interesting.
break down the food and make it usable to us. I was looking at an example of a child who had a problem that the floral bacteria in their small intestines was actually killed off. It was a disease.
Hmm.
And so what needed to do was repopulate the small intestines. So there was an uncle in the family who everyone liked. He was a very popular person. And what they didn't know was he had suffered from an anxiety disorder. So the child, before the disease, was calm and happy. They did this implant of in his microbiome, and within 3 days, the child had an anxiety disorder. They're going, there's that whole other realm of what to do with the problem, and how set points and what's living in your small intestines impact anxiety. So it just gets more and more complicated. Depending on what you eat, you can start to starve the floral bacteria that cause anxiety. You can actually starve them, not to the point that they're completely gone, but the point they have very little impact on your mood and the level of stress that you feel.
Yeah. So how are we dealing with the anxiety as a society?
Drugs, pharmaceuticals.
So
It's not
basically,
the.
we're not solving the problem. We are just putting a band-aid on. Is that what we're
It's
doing?
worse than a band-aid because the pharmaceuticals deplete the system of the basic neurotransmitters that it need to function well.
Hmm.
It's complex, and it's probably not the place to go into it. But when I talk to somebody, they come to my office and I'd say, "How long have you been on Prozac?" They look at me and say, "How could you tell?" I said, "Is it more than 10 years ago?" "How do you know that?"
Hmm.
Or whatever it is, because they've now got symptoms caused by the medication. So that's the way they're coping with it. And it's like, no one is really paying attention to this. And the medical community, it's like they're concerned, but they don't have the alternatives to really deal effectively with it. And, since I know medical doctors who I like and respect and have dealt with for many years, they are so overwhelmed by the number of issues that they have to deal with on an everyday basis that I understand they can't be expert at everything.
Hmm.
About the time that you've seen 50 people today or more, a medical practice has to see 5 to 6 people an hour. Okay, so you say, well, that's 8 hours. That's about 40 to 50 people going. What you have is 5 minutes to figure out what the number one issue is, what symptom, and how we're going to manage the symptom, not how we're going to cure the problem. So it's a Band-Aid time. It's not cure time. Did that make sense?
Oh yeah. I had to visit doctors at some point in my life, and I was
Yeah.
like always floored by the first of all the amount of time, and second, right away they jump into medication, to the point one day I had to tell my previous doctor, family doctor, without disclosing the name here, who was very respectful of my wishes. And you know what?
Yeah.
When we met the first time, and I said, listen, doc, there is one thing I usually don't do. I don't like taking medications. So if I come to see you, I come to see you to understand what I have. But please don't push any medication on me. You know what? He was very respectful of that. And one day I remember I had a very, very bad sore throat. Very bad. And I went over to see him and he said, and I said, do I need medication for this? Usually they prescribe antibiotics.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
For a viral infection. Okay, I
Yeah,
got it.
and I did tell him. I said, "You tell me, do I need medication for this?" He said, "No. Go home and sleep." For 2 days, I slept. I was fine. I still remember it till today because he was honest enough with me to tell me, not to push medication. I mean, I understand how the medical doctors work here in this country, and pharmaceutical pushing every.
It's easy to respect that doctor.
Yeah.
And we know that sleep, we talked about it last week, sleep impacts your immune system. If you don't get enough, your immune system is harmed.
Yeah.
Especially with those natural killer cells that go after cancer. And you sleep adequately, and your whole immune system does a major uptick.
Yeah.
You're just healthier. And in terms of all the major degenerative diseases, sleep is one of the very best answers. And anxiety hurts your immune system as well.
Well,
Among
that's
other
what
things.
helped me. That's what helped me. Those 2 days of sleep.
Yes.
That's all I did was drink water and sleep. And I felt
Let me
better. And I never had the issue ever since.
let me give you one other piece that probably is really quite important.
Yeah.
And that is anxiety tragically hurts your digestive system. One of the things about digestion is that you need hydrochloric acid. Yeah, your stomach produces a whole lot of that. And what that does is it dissolves the food, and betaine, which is an enzyme. And anxiety reduces your body's ability to make hydrochloric acid. And so even if you're eating quality food, you're getting less benefit from it because your digestion has been so harmed by your body shutting down its digestive system. And when someone's in that situation, I invariably recommend a supplement that has hydrochloric acid and betaine in it. Matter of fact, because I'm getting older, I take one anyway. Every time I eat, I take some of that.
Interesting. So, I got a question here before Joan Angelia Jones asked this question earlier. I just didn't get to it. Is anxiety a part of depression? I know we're going to be talking about depression next week, but I'd like to, if you could answer.
There's a lot of confusion with this.
Yeah.
Anxiety is actually in the dopamine system. Depression is in the serotonin system. You get going on these major neurotransmitter dysregulations, which we can talk about at length next week. And you say, well, this is pretty hard to tell the difference. Well, if you take a look at serotonin, which controls the prefrontal cortex, your ability to pay attention, just a number of things. And you go, serotonin is where long-term happiness and contentment live. Dopamine is where short-term pleasure occurs. Like a piece of chocolate cake, if you like that, is a dopamine experience. A video game is a dopamine experience. It's not happiness, but it is addictive because it gives you that dopamine rush. So what we're really looking to do is to make a distinction between the two of them to figure out what to do about it. If it's depression, there's some really cool things to do that pretty well control it rapidly. I was frequently in a circumstance, matter of fact, I lost count how many times this happened. I have people come to my office and say, I have depression, if you don't help me, I've decided which concrete abutment I'm going to run my car into at 100 miles an hour. 5 weeks later, they said, I can't believe I said that stuff. I don't feel depressed at all. We regulated the amount of serotonin in their body, and they could hardly find sadness anymore. So there are solutions to these things that are very real solutions, and you can either do it herbally, you can do it through, sometimes it's actually talking with a counselor, and you start regulating the amount of hopelessness and lostness that you feel, and you feel a lot better fast.
Yeah, instead of medications.
instead of medication.
But that's how the system here is just the pushing for that. I'm 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 I won't use the term anti. It's just I don't take medication. Some people say, "Well, I got a headache. Go take a medication for it or aspirin, whatever." No, no. You go sleep and you'll be fine the next day.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. So, well, certainly we. Any final thoughts before I let you go, Doctor Stewart?
Get quality sleep, restorative sleep. It is the foundation of your well being. How's that for good advice?
It is. It is indeed. We can't thank you enough for really carving out time for me here and for our viewers. And I look forward to next week talking about depression. So it's a fascinating topic. I read a little bit about it, not as extensively as you, uh, but I can only imagine what goes on because I'm curious to learn and understand what really goes on with depression. Why do people
It's
get
it's a fascinating topic with
yeah,
lots of different facets to it, and we'll do a deep dive into it and make it understandable and help
yeah,
people figure out what to do to either overcome it themselves or
yeah,
help the people around them who are suffering from it.
indeed, indeed. Well, I look forward to next week, and I am sure our viewers will prepare some key questions. So,
Oh, good, good, good.
well, thank you so much, Dr. Stewart. Look forward to seeing you next week. Uh, Yeah. All right, folks. So, just to conclude this for you, anxiety, it is a complex and very challenging aspects or experience, whatever term you want to use. But it doesn't have to sort of impact your life if you don't reach out for help or understanding, because you need to understand. Now, there are those who will approach it through medication and all that stuff, but you need to understand the consequences of that decision, long-term impact on your health, or you can approach it through the sort of embracing a holistic approach to it. There are ways, and this is where you see this kind of back and forth conversations. Do I go with the medications and so forth, or do I go with the holistic? But you won't be able to make a decision till you have a better understanding of what the issue is. And this is what I'm trying to do here. And I'm very grateful to Dr. Stewart carving out time for me here to come and share this knowledge with us also. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Our next topic, or our topic for next week, is depression. And just to remind you, I'm going to be changing the name of the channel from Health Tips for Life to Wellness, and I'm even forgetting the title of it. It's Wellness, Health and Wellness Wisdom. Health and Wellness Wisdom. So it's going to take a few days before you see that. So, all right, guys. And like I always say, your health is your best asset. Till next time. Bye bye.